My guest today is Sheldon Greaves, author and self-described guerrilla scholar. He's built a path outside traditional institutions, working in science education, confounding a university, publishing research and pursuing ambitious independent projects. In this episode, we will explore what it means to take control of your intellectual life, how to think independently and learn deeply on your own terms, and contribute meaningful work without waiting for permission. This episode will expand what we believe is possible. Before we get into it with Sheldon, let's begin with a brief introduction from you, Sheldon.
Okay. My name is Sheldon Greaves. I live in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, in the state of Oregon, a small town called Albany. I have a PhD from the University of California at Berkeley in ancient Near Eastern studies. My primary area of emphasis was the Hebrew Bible. But when I got to the end of graduate school, I kind of found that academia wasn't really where I wanted to be, which was kind of a hard thing because with a degree like mine, academia is pretty much the only game in town. But I decided a couple of things. First of all, I didn't want to specialize because that just makes you stunted. And second, in the course of my studies, I had to take a number of financial leaves of absence. And while I wasn't in school, I still had to keep up on my studies. So I had to learn how to get creative intellectually and learn how to cut my own path. And those tools helped me to basically move away from academia and do some other things that, quite frankly, were a lot more interesting. And so I decided to write a book about what I learned and how I learned it and how other people can basically take control of their own education, their own intellectual life, and essentially cut their own path and do things that they maybe wouldn't have thought themselves capable of doing.
Let's get into it. Mm-hmm. What made you realize that the traditional academic path wasn't the only way to live a serious intellectual life? And what did you choose instead?
Mm-hmm. Part of it was just that actually my wife and I were both working on doctoral programs at the time. She was working on a degree, on a doctorate in classics at Stanford. And we were in the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 80s and early 90s, which is right when the computer revolution was taking off. And there was just an amazing amount of really interesting stuff happening. We were right in the middle of a revolution, and it wasn't one of those things where you look back and go, that was a revolution I was in the middle of. No, you knew right then that everything was changing and the world was never going to be the same. And somehow it just seemed like a wasted opportunity not to broaden my perspective, my thinking, and look for other ways of exercising my mind. Now, another thing that happened that was kind of pivotal was that on one dark night in, I think it was around 1991 or so, I got mugged in East Palo Alto, which was a really bad part of town. And I wasn't badly hurt, but I was kind of mentally shaken. And I thought to myself, I don't ever want to be out of control of my safety like that ever again. So I started looking around for a place to learn martial arts after I graduated. And I eventually ended up at this school called the International Institute for Professional Executive Protection. And it was basically a school for training high threat level bodyguards. And they were teaching people this martial art that was brand new, at least in the United States, called Muay Thai. And I started studying there and learning there. And to make a long story very short, the guy who was running the place took me aside one day and said, I have this school here, but I'd like to make it into something bigger, something more expansive. And I want it to be a full-fledged university, not just a little school for, issuing certificates or whatever. I wanted to have bachelor's and master's and doctoral programs and all that. He says, but I need people with advanced degrees to help me. And you've got an advanced degree from Berkeley. How would you like to co-found a university with me? And I was kind of blown away by that, obviously. But I told him, I says, look, that sounds wonderful. I would love to do that. But I don't know anything about intelligence or counterterrorism or all this stuff that you want to teach. And his answer was interesting. He said, I know that you have learned how to go outside your area of expertise. And I also know that you keep showing up to the gym and training hard and doing what what you're supposed to do. And we're gradually getting you in touch with your inner badass, and I think you can do this. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And we did it. I mean, we actually managed to found what became Henley Putnam University. I think we went live in 2003. And then a few years later, that university merged with National American University, but the school itself still exists. And I had the opportunity to learn an amazing amount of stuff from some really interesting people about things that I would never have had the opportunity to learn about or enjoy if I had stayed in academia. So that was kind of a lesson for me that sometimes things can happen to you, and if you have the tools, you can pivot and actually take advantage of bad things that happen and turn them into good things.
Thank you, Sheldon. A lot of people assume credibility comes from institutions. Can someone outside academia really produce work that matters, and what separates those who can from those who can't?
Yeah. In fact, most of the really interesting thinking that's going on right now, and actually has been going on for some time, has been coming from people who are not part of institutional academia. In the 20th century, for instance, late 20th century, there was Buckminster Fuller, an engineer who basically invented the field of systems theory. There was the historian Barbara Tuchman, who published a number of outstanding histories about a number of different things, 14th century Europe, 20th century Palestine, about the origins of the First World War, about the fallout and the aftermath of the American Revolution. If she had been in academia, there's no way they would have allowed her to cover such a broad range of topics. They would have said, stick with 14th century Europe or 20th century Palestine, and that's it. You don't get to go out of your lane. These two people were not people. They were not people who had university affiliation. Betty Friedan was a housewife who effectively created the basis for the modern feminist movement with a book called The Feminine Mystique. And a guy named Eric Hoffer wrote a book that Okay, so yeah, is it possible for people outside of institutional academia to do serious work? Absolutely. In fact, you could point right away, for instance, to all the stuff that's happening with artificial intelligence. That is not happening in academia. That's happening outside of academia. As far as individuals are concerned, you've got people like what's his name, Taleb, who is writing about black swan events and anti-fragility. He is not affiliated with the university, as far as I know. There is Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is doing a tremendous amount to raise awareness of science issues. I do not believe that he has any kind of university appointment. If you go back further, we had the engineering genius of Buckminster Fuller, who basically invented systems theory. The historian Barbara Tuchman, who wrote a number of marvelous histories on a wide range of subjects that she would never have been able to cover if she had been in academia. One of my favorites is a guy named Eric Hoffer, who wrote an absolutely groundbreaking study on the nature of mass movements called The True Believer, and this was back in 1958. That book is still required reading if you are doing political science. Eric Hoffer was a dock worker in San Francisco, but he was a voracious reader. He was self-educated, and he just had a real gift for taking ideas and articulating them in ways that people hadn't seen before. So yeah, it's definitely possible. One of the reasons why today is because there's information out there that is just, I mean, huge amounts of information that most people don't even know exists. And while there's also a lot of disinformation out there, and I have an entire chapter in my book dedicated to filtering that out, there are also some great resources for anyone who is willing to dig a little deeper and to get creative. And sometimes it actually means, even stepping away from the internet and going to more traditional things that you're likely to find in your local public library. Most libraries have resources that go way beyond what the average patron thinks is going to be there. If you want to have some fun, go talk to the reference librarian at your local public library and say, tell me 5 resources that most people don't know exist. And you'll probably be lucky if you can get the person to stop at 10 or 11, because there's just so many things that are there, and most of them are free. So the resources are there. That's the thing. The hard part for most people is that we don't have the same amount of leisure that we have had in the past. And if there was one stumbling block, that's probably the biggest, is that our time is being just consumed with everybody clamoring for our attention, whether it's social media or marketing everywhere you look. And that's an important thing too, is learning to cultivate what I like to call a zone of silence, where you can actually, be at home with your own thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Sheldon, I think my audience would like to know, from your perspective, do you think that modern education is failing?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
From your perspective, do you think that modern education is failing?
I think it's in trouble. Yeah. And I think there are 2 reasons for that. The first reason is that we have pretty much abandoned the idea that education is about developing the person, helping you figure out what kind of a person you want to be. Instead, it's pretty much all about your career, what you're going to do, what you're going to do when you go into the job market. Now, there's a couple of things wrong with this. The first is if you talk about someone preparing for the job market, they go and they major in something. Well, the truth is, in the job market today, most people go through their working lives and they'll have 3 or even 4 different careers. So if you're going to college to prepare for a career, well, which career is that? Chances are you only know what one of them is going to be, and you might not even find a job in your chosen field. That happens a lot too. So where does that leave you? It leaves you kind of in a rough place. The other thing is, there used to be this wonderful phrase that you heard in association with going to college, and that phrase was preparation for life. And it wasn't just about what you were going to do to make a living. It was about what's your personal philosophy? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? What kind of person do you want to be? And for the most part, a lot of that was communicated through the humanities. And the humanities are kind of in retreat right now. A lot of humanities departments are being closed entirely. The approach to humanities has gotten kind of weird, where it's now all about why these works that really were amazingly great, maybe aren't so great, or they communicate something that is toxic or whatever. And a lot of that is stuff that's just been read back into them from the outside. The other problem when you get below the university level is that we don't value teaching the way we should. I've spent some time the last couple of years as a substitute and an educational assistant at the local school districts. And I see these teachers who are just incredibly dedicated and very competent and just ready to do whatever it takes to teach their kids, but they're being just overwhelmed with busy work. Their funding is getting cut. They're constantly having to justify what they do. And in the political sphere, they keep getting blamed for all of society's ills when, we now know that at least here in the United States, we have proof that our teachers are literally willing to take a bullet for their kids. So that's that is an issue, and it needs to stop.
In my research about you, I saw something about guerrilla scholarship. I don't know if you have mentioned that here. So my audience would like to know what guerrilla scholarship is all about.
Okay. Guerrilla scholarship is basically about taking control of your own intellectual and educational life. And you do that by being creative, by being innovative, by ignoring certain conventions, and by being willing to go where into a field, even if you aren't a specialist, doing the hard work to learn what you need to learn, and also just learning for pleasure, learning because it's fun, and as well as learning for personal empowerment. And the truth is, you don't need to go to college in order to do that. You can do that in college if you are willing to, pony up a huge amount of money, and if you use your time well. But you don't have to. You can do it. You can do it on your own, or with as I like to say, in the company of friends, which is even better. You can form your own learning communities. You can form your own institutions even for learning, and not only make your life more interesting, but you can enhance the life of your community and the lives of those around you.
So Sheldon, you don't think that college is a good idea?
If you can afford it, and you know what you want to do, it's I wouldn't say it's a bad idea, but you have to use it wisely. You have to be willing to put in a degree of effort that college doesn't necessarily require from people anymore, and that's unfortunate. The thing is, you go to college not just to go to college. You go to college so that you can hang out with really, really intelligent people and learn from them directly. Now, that's how it's supposed to work. Now, can you do that outside of college? Yeah, absolutely. You can find people, and I talk about this in my book, how to find people who have comparable levels of competence and insight and learn from them. The question really is, what do you want to learn? What do you want to, and how far do you want to go? Some things, yeah, you're going to need to go to college to learn. If you want to become a doctor, you're not going to learn that from YouTube. You've got to go to medical school. If you want to become a lawyer, yeah, you're going to need to go to law school. A couple of years of college to get some general education, I think that's a great idea. But you can do that at a community college. You can do that at some kind of a lyceum or something. You don't need to go to a big school or get a big name with a big diploma in order to become a well-rounded, educated, and thoughtful and articulate human being.
Oh, okay. So can you please talk about your book a little? I think those who are listening, they will want to know about your book.
Yeah, the book is titled The Guerrilla Scholar's Handbook. Here it is here. And it's available on Amazon, also on Barnes & Noble and Thrift Books, and you can probably order it through your local independent bookseller. It's been, it was published last June, so it's been out a little less than a year. And it essentially, it's part guidebook, part how-to, part memoir, but it's also kind of a manifesto because education is under attack. There's a lot of censorship going on. There's a lot of disinformation out there. And my book talks about creative ways to do research, creative ways to learn, but it also talks about addressing these other problems of censorship and disinformation and these problems that are plaguing not just academia, but our society in general. And I'm so far, the response has been pretty positive. People who have contacted me about the book, they like it. And if you also want to follow what other things I'm doing, I have a Substack called The Guerrilla Scholar, and people can contact me and hear more about guerrilla scholarship there.
Okay, Sheldon. Sheldon, my final question for you is this. For someone who's looking to follow through on your path, what advice do you have for them?
The first thing I would do is start keeping a notebook. Have a place where you can write down what you're thinking about, what you're reading about, what interests you, what excites you, what you find boring, and why. And start building a body of ideas in your notebook. And this does several things. First of all, it gets you, it forces you to think regularly about why you think what you think, which is a really good idea. It also kind of becomes a little bank account of ideas. And once it reaches a certain size, you can start going back and thinking, hey, that was pretty good. That was a pretty good idea. I could write a paper on that, or I could do a presentation on that, or I could even write a book about that. There have been entire intellectual careers based on exploring, just one potent idea. So start putting down ideas, putting down your thoughts. It'll be ugly at first. Don't worry about it. Just keep writing. Don't stop. The second thing is start accumulating connections with people who inspire you, people who know things that you want to learn. Build a network, a community of fellow learners. I like to tell people that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Go find a room where you're not the smartest person and pay attention. Learn how to ask questions and how to get people talking about what they know so that you can learn from them. And I talk about that in the book as well. And the third thing I would say is read as much as you can, but be choosy. And this is another thing I talk about. I hear about these people who read, 100 books in a year or 200 books in a year, and I think, no. If you're reading a book that quickly, it probably didn't have that much to say anyway. Look for really good books. Ask around and take your time and find out, about the things you're interested in, of course. If a book is worth reading, it's probably worth reading twice, maybe 3 times. Take your time with it. Learn how to chew on an idea and keep your mind open to the first faint stirrings of a bright idea. And that will get you started. That will help you form a basis. And I guess the last thing too is have a place or find a way to be alone with your thoughts for a while, even if it's just like half an hour a day. Mindfulness practices, meditation, or just finding a place where it's quiet. Put the phone away, turn off the phone, turn off the television, and just let yourself be and think and learn how to be comfortable with your own thoughts. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it can be very rewarding because then you can start to really think for yourself.
I love when you said it's not as easy as it sounds. Thank you very much, Sheldon. For the final time, where can my audience know about you, read about you, and know more about what you do on your book?
Right. Probably the best place is my Substack, which is The Guerrilla Scholar. I also occasionally post on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. My Blue Sky account is Guerrilla Scholar, and I also have a Guerrilla Scholar Facebook page. But the Substack is definitely the most active. That's where I do most of my stuff. And again, if you're interested in acquiring the book, you can order it online through Barnes & Noble, Thrift Books, or Amazon. Oh, it's
Thank you,
also
Sheldon.
available in Spanish too for those who are interested.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you for being my guest on this special episode. It's been a pleasure to have you on this episode. To everyone listening to this
Thank
right
you. I
now,
appreciate the opportunity.
thank you very much, Sheldon. To everyone listening to this right now, if there's one thing to take
Thank
away
you.
from this conversation, is this. Don't need permission to think deeply, learn seriously, or contribute meaningfully. The real question is whether you are willing to take control of your intellectual life or let it be shaped entirely by systems you didn't choose. Sheldon's work is a reminder that curiosity, discipline, and independent thinking are still available to anyone who decides to pursue them. If this episode challenged you on how you see learning and knowledge, share it with someone who's ready to think for themselves. And as always, control your mind or something else will. See you in the next episode.